"Let me show you something," she said, holding up her empty hand. The aliens watched as she reached into what looked like completely empty space. Her hand disappeared up to the wrist, like she was reaching into an invisible hole in the air. When she pulled it back out, she was holding a perfect red flower, its petals still covered with morning dew. "This flower," she said, "is growing in a garden on Kepler 442b, about 400 light-years from here. I just picked it." The silence in the room was so complete you could hear the air recycling systems humming. "Impossible," whispered the crystal being. Choi Jin smiled and handed the flower to the nearest alien representative. "Space is just another ocean. Once you learn to swim between the waves, distance becomes meaningless. The architects taught us to see the connections that link everything together." The Great Hall on Arcturus Prime buzzed with nervous energy. 47 different alien species had gathered for this emergency meeting, and none of them knew what to expect. The crystal-like Zethkari clicked and chimed as they whispered among themselves. The robotic Nexus Collective representatives processed data with soft humming sounds. Even the floating Veiltar, who rarely showed emotion, pulsed with anxious colors. Captain Kim Day walked to the center of the massive chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He looked so small and ordinary compared to the towering aliens around him, but somehow his presence filled the entire room. 300 years ago, we left Earth with simple dreams, he began, his voice carrying that strange, harmonic quality that made everyone lean forward to listen. We wanted to explore, to find new worlds, maybe discover we weren't alone in the universe. A massive creature that looked like a walking tree made of metal groaned softly. "Your species has always been foolishly curious," Captain Kim smiled. "Yes, we have. And that curiosity led us to the edge of everything you think exists." He gestured toward the star maps floating above them, showing the known galaxy with all its territories marked and claimed. "You see borders here, trade routes, empire boundaries. But what happens when you go past the last star? What's beyond the rim where your maps end?" "Nothing," declared Ambassador Veltok of the Hegemony, his forearms crossed in certainty. "Empty void. We've sent probes. There's nothing out there but cold darkness." "That's what we thought too," Captain Kim said quietly. "But we were wrong. There's not nothing out there. There's everything." The room erupted in confused murmurs and electronic beeps. Captain Kim waited for quiet before continuing. "When our ship, the Prometheus, crossed beyond the galactic rim, reality started changing. Around us, space stopped being solid and became flexible, like swimming through thick honey instead of flying through vacuum. Stars weren't fixed points anymore. They flowed like rivers of light, connecting in patterns we'd never imagined. A Nexus Collective. Robot's optical sensors whirred as it processed this information. Time dilation effects from gravitational anomalies? No, Captain Kim shook his head. Time itself was different. It didn't move in a straight line from past to future. It spiraled, twisted, sometimes looped back on itself. We experienced moments that happened before we lived them, and memories of events that wouldn't occur for centuries. Engineer Choi Jin stood up from where she'd been sitting with the human delegation. She was a petite woman with gentle eyes, but when she moved toward the center of the chamber, every alien in the room focused on her with laser intensity. "The architects found us on our third day in the void," she said, her voice soft, but somehow, reaching every corner of the vast hall. "Being so ancient that they remember when the universe was young and darkness was all there was. They watched the first stars being born. They saw galaxies form from cosmic dust. Impossible, hissed a serpentine delegate. Nothing could be that old. Choi Jin smiled and held up her empty hand. "Let me show you what impossible really means." She reached into what looked like completely empty air beside her. Her hand vanished up to the wrist, disappearing into space that should have been solid. When she pulled it back, she was holding a perfect flower, bright red petals still wet with dew, a green stem that looked freshly cut. The silence was deafening. "This flower," she said calmly, "is growing right now in a garden on Kepler 442b. That planet is 437 light-years from where we're sitting. I just reached across space and picked it." She walked over to the nearest alien representative and handed them the flower. The creature took it with trembling appendages, sensors confirming it was real, fresh, impossible. "Space isn't empty," Choijin explained. "It's an ocean with currents and depths you've never learned to see. The architects taught us to swim between the waves." Dr. Kethmar had been studying alien technology for over 2 centuries. As the Zethkari Empire's top scientist, his crystalline body could process information faster than most supercomputers. He had reverse-engineered weapons from a dozen different species and unlocked secrets that had baffled researchers for generations. But the small piece of metal sitting on his lab table was driving him completely insane. "Run the analysis again," he commanded his assistants, his crystal structure flickering with frustrated purple light. "Sir, we've run it 47 times, replied his junior researcher. "The results are always the same." Dr. Kethmar stared at the fragment they had carefully cut from the Prometheus's hull. It looked like ordinary metal, smooth, silver, nothing special about it. But when they put it under their most advanced scanners, the readings made no sense whatsoever. "According to our instruments," he muttered, "this material exists in 7 different dimensions at the same time. That's impossible. Matter can't be in multiple dimensional states simultaneously." Across the galaxy, the Nexus Collective was having their own problems. Their most advanced artificial intelligence, designated Prime Alpha 7, had been trying to interface with the human ship's computer systems for 3 days straight. The AI was supposed to be able to hack into any technology in the known universe within minutes. Instead, it kept crashing. "Status report," demanded Commander Zixtal, his mechanical voice echoing in the pristine white laboratory. "Prime Alpha 7 has suffered 17 complete system failures," reported Technician Unit 442. "Each time it attempts to connect with the human vessel's systems, it encounters data structures that cause cascade errors throughout its neural networks." "What kind of data structures?" "Unknown, sir. The AI describes them as impossible mathematical frameworks before it shuts down to prevent permanent damage." Back on Lunar Base, things were getting even stranger. Pilot Yun Ara had been giving a tour to a group of scientists and military officials, showing them around the mysterious ship that had somehow merged with their space station. Everything was going normally until they reached a solid bulkhead blocking their path. "Sorry, folks, this section is sealed off," said General Park Tae, pointing to the thick metal wall. "We'll have to go around." Yunara looked at the wall and tilted her head slightly, like she was considering something amusing. Why go around when you can go through? Before anyone could ask what she meant, she walked straight toward the solid metal barrier. The watching group expected her to stop, or maybe press some hidden button. Instead, she walked right through, the wall like it was made of smoke. Her body passed through the solid metal without any sound, without any resistance, like she was stepping through a hologram. She emerged on the other side and poked her head back through the wall, grinning at the shocked faces staring at her. "How is that possible?" gasped Dr. Lee Somin, the base's chief physicist. Yun Ara stepped back through the wall to rejoin them, as casually as walking through a doorway. "Density is just another variable to adjust, like turning up the volume on music or changing the temperature in a room." "That makes no sense," Dr. Lee protested. "You can't just change the fundamental properties of matter." "Why not?" Yun Ara asked innocently. "Your body is mostly empty space anyway. Atoms are tiny particles with huge gaps between them. I just convinced the atoms in my body to line up with the gaps in the wall's atoms." General Park Tae's face was turning red with frustration. "That's not how physics works. Give us the technical specifications. Show us the science behind this technology." Yun Ara's smile grew wider. "Your mathematics only describe 3 dimensions, length, width, and height. We've learned to think in 17 dimensions. Trying to explain our technology using your current science would be like trying to describe a rainbow to someone who's never seen color." 17 dimensions, Dr. Lee whispered. "Actually, we think there might be more," Yunara said cheerfully. "We're still exploring. The architects taught us that reality has more layers than anyone imagined. Your science is like studying a photograph of the ocean while we've learned to dive into the depths. She walked through the wall one more time, just to prove it wasn't a trick, leaving behind a group of very confused and very worried scientists. The emergency council session had been going on for 6 hours, and nobody wanted to take a break. How could they? Everything they thought they knew about the universe had just been turned upside down. Navigator Li Su stood in the center of the Great Chamber on Arcturus Prime, surrounded by 47 different alien species who all looked like they'd just been hit by lightning. His human appearance seemed almost boring compared to the exotic creatures around him, but his words carried the weight of cosmic truth. "The architects asked me to share their message with you," he said, his voice calm despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. "But first you need to understand what you're really looking at when you stare up at the stars." He raised his hand, and suddenly every mind in the room was flooded with images that shouldn't exist. Not through screens or holograms, but directly into their thoughts, as clear as their own memories. Ambassador Veltok of the Hegemony gasped as visions filled his consciousness. He saw vast cities that existed in folded space, their buildings twisted into impossible geometries that somehow made perfect sense. Streets that curved through dimensions he couldn't name, populated by beings that looked like living mathematics. Dr. Kethmar, the Zethkari scientist, watched in amazement as civilizations rose and fell across eons like waves on a beach. Entire species evolved from simple creatures to beings of pure energy, then transcended even that to become something beyond physical existence altogether. "This is impossible," whispered Commander Zixtal of the Nexus Collective. But even as he said it, he was watching beings of pure thought guide newborn galaxies through their first billion years of existence. These entities moved between star systems like gardeners tending flowers, nurturing young civilizations and helping them grow. "How many times has this happened?" asked a delegate from the Outer Rim territories, her voice shaking. Li Su's expression grew serious. "The architects have witnessed this cycle countless times. Reality has infinite layers, each one supporting different forms of life. Some exist in what you call physical space. Others live in dimensions of pure thought, or in the spaces between atoms, or in the flow of time itself. The images shifted, showing species that had reached incredible heights of technology and wisdom, only to suddenly vanish, not destroyed by war or disaster, but simply gone." "What happened to them?" demanded the crystal being from the Zethkari Empire. "They reached a critical point," Li Su explained. "Every species eventually faces the same choice. They can evolve beyond their physical limitations and join the greater community of consciousness that spans dimensions, or they can remain locked in their rigid thinking patterns and eventually face extinction." More visions flooded their minds, species that clung too tightly to their old ways of thinking, building bigger weapons instead of expanding their understanding. Civilizations that became so focused on controlling territory that they forgot to explore the infinite possibilities beyond physical space. "The architects call them fatal blind spots," Li Su continued. "When a species becomes too attached to the idea that reality only exists in 3 dimensions, they create limitations that eventually destroy them. They spend all their energy fighting over pieces of space instead of learning to exist in all dimensions simultaneously." A nervous silence fell over the assembly. Many of these species had spent thousands of years building their empires, conquering worlds, establishing dominance over vast regions of space. "Are you saying our empires are meaningless?" asked the tree-like delegate, his metal leaves rustling with anxiety. Li Su smiled sadly. "You've built impressive empires. You've conquered worlds, established trade routes, created technologies that seemed miraculous to your ancestors. But the architects taught us something important. You've been building in only 3 dimensions. The visions changed again, showing structures that existed across multiple realities simultaneously. Cities that were somehow located in 17 different dimensions at once, connected by pathways that curved through space and time and thought itself. "We learned to build across dimensions," Li Su said simply. "Not just tall or wide or deep, but in directions you don't have names for yet. The universe is so much bigger and stranger than any of us imagined. The question now is whether you're ready to expand your thinking, or if you'll choose to stay trapped in the small corner of reality you already know." The chamber erupted in frightened whispers and heated debates, as 47 civilizations suddenly realized they might be cosmic children playing with toys. Supreme Admiral Kethfor hadn't slept in 3 days. As leader of the Zethkari Empire's entire fleet, he commanded more firepower than most civilizations could imagine. But now, staring at the reports flooding his command center, he felt like a child facing a puzzle he couldn't solve. "How many ships do we have in position?" he asked his tactical officer, his crystalline body flickering with stress patterns. 700 Zethkari vessels, sir. The Nexus Collective has brought 600 of their best warships. The Veiltar Empire contributed another 700. Total fleet strength, 2,000 ships. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 3 empires that had been enemies for centuries had joined together for one purpose: to force humanity to share the architect knowledge before these humans made every other species obsolete. "Target Earth's major cities," Admiral Kethfor commanded, "but warn them first, we're not monsters, we just want what they learned out there." Communications Officer Zix Prime sent the message across all frequencies. "Attention, Earth. You have 12 hours to surrender all architect technology and knowledge. If you refuse, we will demonstrate the consequences of defying the combined empires." The response came back within minutes, in a calm, human voice that somehow reached every ship. Simultaneously, message received. "We understand your concerns. Please proceed with your demonstration." Admiral Kethfor paused. That wasn't the response he'd expected. No panic, no desperate negotiations, no begging for mercy. Just polite acknowledgement. "Sir," reported his weapons officer, "all ships are ready to fire." "Very well, target the Pacific Ocean first. Let them see what our gravitational weapons can do to their planet's surface." The order went out to all 2,000 ships. Weapons that could crack moons charged up with enough energy to split continents. These weren't ordinary lasers or missiles. These were reality-bending tools that could make gravity itself into a weapon. Fire. 2,000 gravitational beams lanced through space toward Earth, carrying enough destructive force to reshape the planet's surface. Each beam could have turned mountains into dust or boiled entire oceans. They passed right through Earth like it wasn't there. "What?" Admiral Kethfor stared at his instruments in confusion. "Run diagnostics on all weapon systems immediately." "Sir, the weapons fired correctly. The beams should have hit the target, but sensors show they passed through the planet without making contact." On Lunar Base, Communications Officer Park Hana sat calmly at her station, watching the readouts as thousands of weapons fired at her homeworld. She opened a channel to the entire fleet surrounding them. "Your demonstration was very impressive," she said, her voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that all the returned humans possessed. "Those gravitational weapons could definitely destroy planets. In the 3 dimensions, you understand." Admiral Kethvor's crystal body turned deep red with frustration. "Impossible. Matter cannot simply ignore gravitational forces," Park Hana smiled, even though he couldn't see her through the communication link. "You're absolutely right. In 3-dimensional, space matter cannot ignore gravity. But we've learned to exist in several more dimensions than that. From our current perspective, your weapons are like trying to hit a fish by shooting at its reflection in the water." "This is some kind of trick," roared Commander Veltok from the Hegemony flagship. "No species can simply step outside the laws of physics." "We haven't stepped outside the laws of physics," Park Hana replied patiently. "We've just learned that the laws you know are only a small part of a much bigger rule book. The architects taught us that reality has many more pages than you've read." The massive fleet hung in space around Earth, 2,000 of the most advanced warships ever built, and none of them could even touch their target. It was like trying to grab smoke with their bare hands. "Sir," whispered the tactical officer, "if their planet exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, our weapons literally cannot reach them. We might as well be shooting at ghosts." Admiral Kethfor stared at the beautiful blue world floating peacefully before him, completely unharmed, despite the most powerful attack in galactic history. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly. From Lunar Base, Park Hana's voice reached them. Again gentle but firm. "That's up to you. The architect's knowledge isn't something that can be taken by force. It has to be earned through understanding. And the first step toward understanding is admitting that everything you thought you knew about the universe might be wrong. The black hole known as Charybdis 7 had been carefully avoided by every spacefaring civilization for millions of years. Nothing that went near it ever came back out. So, when Admiral Kethvor's sensors detected something moving inside the event horizon, he thought his instruments had finally broken down from stress. "Run that scan again," he ordered his tactical officer, rubbing his crystal eyes in disbelief. "Sir, I've run it 5 times. There's definitely something in there, and it's moving toward us." The assembled fleet of 2,000 ships watched in stunned silence as something impossible happened. A shape began emerging from the swirling darkness of the black hole's event horizon, a place where, according to every law of physics, they knew nothing could ever escape. The UES Darwin slid out of the black hole like a surfer riding a wave, its hull gleaming with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The ship moved with a grace that defied explanation, as if gravity itself was helping it along, instead of trying to crush it. "This is Captain Bei Wu of the UES Darwin," came a transmission that somehow reached every ship in the fleet simultaneously. "Sorry we're late to the party. Time moves a bit differently when you're surfing the event horizon." Commander Veltok's 4 arms were trembling as he stared at his screens. "That's impossible. Nothing can survive inside a black hole. The gravitational forces would tear apart any known material." Captain Bei Wu's voice carried that same strange harmonic quality as the other returned humans. "You're absolutely right. Any known material would be destroyed. But we learned to become unknown material. The time streams inside event horizons are like cosmic highways once you figure out how to ride them. Before anyone could process this information, another impossible thing happened. The star at the center of the system began to pulse with unusual light, and something started emerging from its blazing core. The UES Tesla materialized out of pure stellar fire, its hull converted into some kind of coherent plasma that held the shape of a ship while burning with the intensity of a small sun. The vessel glowed like a piece of the star itself had decided to go for a casual flight. "Tesla reporting for duty," announced Captain Min-jae, her voice carrying across space despite coming from inside a nuclear furnace. "We've been having a wonderful time learning about stellar dynamics from the inside. Did you know stars have their own kind of consciousness?" Admiral Kethvor felt his crystalline structure starting to crack under the stress. "How many human ships are out there?" As if summoned by his question, more vessels began appearing from locations that shouldn't exist. The UES Newton phased into reality from what looked like empty space, having spent decades exploring the quantum foam between dimensions. The UES Curie emerged from a nebula where it had been learning to communicate with gas clouds that turned out to be vast collective intelligences. Captain Bei Wu's ship drifted closer to the fleet, and through the viewports they could see human figures moving around normally despite being inside a vessel that had just exited a black hole. "I know what you're thinking," Captain Bei said, his voice gentle but firm. "You're wondering how many of us there are and where we've all been hiding. The truth is, we were never hiding. Every human colony ship that was reported lost over the past 3 centuries, we weren't lost, we were being prepared. Dr. Kethmar's scientific instruments were going crazy trying to analyze the returned ships. Each vessel seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, following physics that his equipment couldn't even begin to understand." "Prepared for what?" he managed to ask. "For this moment," Captain Bei replied. "The architects don't recruit species by force. They guide them, help them discover what they're truly capable of. Humanity's curiosity, our willingness to go where others fear to travel, that caught their attention centuries ago. The Tesla drifted closer, its plasma hull pulsing with the rhythm of a living heart." Captain Min-jae's voice joined the conversation. "Every time one of our ships ventured into impossible places, the heart of a star, the depths of a black hole, the spaces between dimensions, we were taking the next step in our evolution." "But why humans?" demanded Commander Zixtal from the Nexus Collective. "What makes your species so special?" Captain Bei Wu's response was simple but profound. "We chose this path the moment we first looked up at the stars and said, I wonder, what's out there? The architects have been waiting for a species brave enough or foolish enough to dive into the unknown without a safety net. Apparently that's us. Around Earth, dozens more human vessels continue to appear from impossible locations, each one a testament to humanity's unstoppable urge to explore the unexplorable. Admiral Kethvor had commanded fleets through 30 different battles across the galaxy. He'd seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed weapons that could tear holes in space itself, and thought he understood what real power looked like. But watching his gravitational cannons transform into rosebushes was breaking his mind in ways he couldn't process. "Status report," he croaked, his crystalline voice cracking with disbelief. "Sir?" his weapons officer replied, staring at readings that made no sense. "Our primary cannons have been converted. They're now producing flowers instead of gravity beams." Across the massive fleet of 2,000 ships, the same impossible thing was happening everywhere. Weapons that had taken decades to build and could destroy entire moons were suddenly sprouting gardens. Missile launchers were blooming with cherry blossoms that somehow survived in the vacuum of space. Energy cannons had become fountains of liquid starlight that formed beautiful sculptures as they froze. "This has to be some kind of weapon, Commander," Veltok insisted from his flagship, watching his ship's armor plating reshape itself into crystalline formations that sang like wind chimes when solar radiation hit them. "They're attacking us with some kind of matter conversion technology, but nobody was dying. Nobody was even getting hurt." The human ships floated peacefully among the fleet, their crews visible through viewports, smiling and waving like they were at a friendly gathering instead of the middle of the largest military confrontation in galactic history. Science Officer Han Jiwoo's voice reached every ship in the fleet simultaneously, her words carrying that strange harmonic quality that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We want to apologize for the confusion. Your weapons were very impressive, but they were designed to destroy things in three-dimensional space. Since we exist in multiple dimensions now, they couldn't actually hurt us." Dr. Kethmar watched in fascination as his ship's hull converted itself into living crystal that grew in beautiful geometric patterns. "But why are you doing this to our ships?" "We're not doing anything to your ships," Han Jiwoo replied gently. "We're showing you what your ships could become if you stopped thinking of them as tools for destruction and started seeing them as canvases for creation." A Nexus Collective robot tried to restore its weapons systems to normal functionality, but every time it rebuilt a cannon, the machinery would immediately transform into something artistic, a sculpture that danced with the ship's movement, or a musical instrument that played harmonies with the cosmic background radiation. "How do we stop this?" demanded Admiral Kethvor. "You don't," Han Jiwoo said simply. "But you don't need to. Look around you. Are your crews in danger? Are your ships falling apart? Are you suffering in any way?" The truth was uncomfortable but undeniable. Despite their weapons becoming gardens and their armor becoming art, the ships were functioning better than ever. The crystalline formations actually made the hulls stronger. The flower cannons were producing oxygen and purifying the air systems. The singing armor was generating energy from stellar radiation more efficiently than their old power systems. "This is what we're offering to teach you," Han Jiwoo continued. "For millions of years, your civilizations have operated on the assumption that power comes from controlling matter, building bigger weapons, stronger armor, faster ships. But true power comes from understanding the connections between all things." Captain Beiwu's voice joined the conversation from his ship that had emerged from a black hole. "The spaces between spaces, the gaps between atoms, the pauses between thoughts. That's where real creation happens. When you learn to work with the fundamental forces instead of against them, matter becomes cooperative instead of resistant." Commander Zixtal's mechanical voice was unusually quiet. "Are you saying we've been doing everything wrong?" "Not wrong," replied Captain Minjae from her plasma-hulled vessel. "Just limited. You've been building in 3 dimensions when 17 were available. You've been fighting matter when you could have been dancing with it. Throughout the fleet, weapons continued transforming into beauty. Missile pods became hives where space-adapted bees produced honey that could survive in vacuum. Laser arrays turned into prisms that painted rainbows across the hulls of neighboring ships. Han Jiwoo's voice carried a note of genuine warmth. We offer to teach you freely. No conditions, no demands, no conquest. The architects taught us that knowledge shared multiplies, while knowledge hoarded eventually dies. But first you have to let go of the idea that the universe is something to be conquered. The largest military force in galactic history found itself surrounded by gardens and music, with not a single casualty or even a scratched hull plate. For the first time in recorded history, a war had ended not in victory or defeat, but in transformation. 1. Year after the fleet of gardens surrounded Earth, the galaxy had become a very different place. The great council chambers on Arcturus Prime buzzed with nervous energy, as representatives from dozens of species gathered for what many believed would be the most important meeting in cosmic history. Captain Kim Day walked to the center of the chamber, but something had changed about him. He still looked human, but there was something more now, as if he existed in multiple places at the same time. When he moved, shadows of other possibilities followed him, and his eyes held depths. That seemed to contain entire universes. The architects have decided to step back, he announced, his voice carrying harmonics that made reality itself seem to vibrate. They've been guiding younger species for millions of years, but they believe it's time for us to choose our own paths forward. Ambassador Veltok shifted nervously in his seat. His forearms had been replaced with crystalline formations that sang softly when he moved, a gift from the humans who had transformed his weapons into art. What does this mean for our civilizations? Captain Kim smiled, and for a moment the assembled delegates could see the simple human explorer he had once been. It means the choice is yours. Humanity has volunteered to help guide any species that wants to learn what we've learned, but we will never force anyone to change. Dr. Kethmar, whose crystal body now pulsed with patterns of light that matched the cosmic background radiation, leaned forward. And if we choose not to evolve as you have, then you continue exactly as you are, Captain Kim replied. The universe is vast enough for infinite ways of existing. Some civilizations will transcend physical limitations. Others will find fulfillment in exploring the 3 dimensions they already know. Both paths have value. Over the past months, small groups from various species had been making pilgrimages to Earth. Not armies or invasion forces, but individuals driven by curiosity and a desire to understand what lay beyond their current existence. Engineer Lim Seul had become their primary guide, meeting each group at lunar base with the same gentle smile and infinite patience. Today she was welcoming a mixed group of volunteers, 3 Zethkari scientists, 5 Nexus Collective individuals who had somehow learned to feel emotions, and 2 Veiltar who claimed they were tired of floating through life without purpose. Welcome to Lunar Base, she said, her voice carrying that familiar harmonic quality. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. This isn't about becoming human. It's about becoming more than what you currently are. One of the Zethkari, a young scientist named Thelvar, stepped forward. His crystal body flickered with nervous energy. Will we still be ourselves afterward? Lim Seul nodded thoughtfully. You'll be more yourself than you've ever been. The transformation doesn't erase who you are. It reveals what you've always had the potential to become. Some of you will learn to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Others might discover they can communicate with the fundamental forces of the universe. A few might find they're meant to remain exactly as they are, but with a deeper understanding of their place in the cosmic web. She gestured toward the viewing windows, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the star-filled darkness. The architects taught us that diversity strengthens the universe's fabric. A galaxy where everyone thinks the same way and exists in the same manner would be like a song with only one note, technically music, but missing all the beauty. Back in the council chambers, the mood was shifting from fear to something approaching hope. Admiral Kethvor, whose fleet now sailed through space powered by crystalline formations that sang with stellar winds, asked the question everyone was thinking. What happens to our empires, our territories, our trade routes? Captain Kim's expression grew thoughtful. That depends on what you want them to become. You can continue fighting over pieces of three-dimensional space if that brings you fulfillment. Or you can learn to build across 17 dimensions, where there's infinite room for everyone to create whatever they can imagine. The transformation wasn't happening quickly or dramatically. Some species sent volunteers eagerly, curious about the possibilities. Others chose to remain observers, content with their current existence, but fascinated by the changes happening around them. A few decided they wanted nothing to do with any of it and retreated to distant parts of the galaxy. All choices were respected. As engineer Lim Searle told each new group of volunteers, "The age of conquering territory has ended. The new age of conscious evolution has begun. And the most beautiful part is that everyone gets to choose which age they want to live in." The alarms wouldn't stop screaming. Captain Li Huan pressed his palms against his ears, but the sound cut right through everything. 3 whole sectors of space were going crazy with alerts, and every single monitor was flashing red like Christmas lights gone mad. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Park Jisoo called out, her voice shaking. She was pointing at the main screen with a trembling finger. Li Huan looked up and felt his stomach drop. There, floating in the black void where nothing should, was a ship, but not just any ship. The computers were saying it was the UES Prometheus, the same vessel that had vanished without a trace 300 years ago. The same ship his great-great-grandfather had read about in old history books. "That's impossible," he whispered, stepping closer to the screen. "Run the scan again." "I've run it 12 times, sir. The computer keeps giving us the same answer." The ship looked nothing like the rusty old exploration vessel from the history files. This thing was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its hull gleamed like it was made of liquid silver, catching starlight in ways that hurt to look at, directly. There were no visible engines, no exhaust trails, nothing that showed how it was moving through space. Yet it glided forward smooth as silk, faster than anything Li Huan had ever seen. "Get me Admiral Park Mina on the comm," he ordered, still staring at the impossible sight. The Admiral's face appeared on screen within seconds, her expression as shocked as his own. "You're seeing this too?" she asked, without any greeting. "Yes." "Ma'am, our fastest interceptor ships are already trying to catch up, but—" Li Huan paused, watching the distance readings. "Ma'am, they're not even close. This thing is moving like physics doesn't apply to it." Admiral Park Mina nodded grimly. "All stations are to stand down immediately. Do not, and I repeat, do not attempt to intercept or engage that vessel." "But Admiral, that's an order, Captain. We have no idea what we're dealing with." Li Huan watched helplessly as the mysterious ship approached Earth. It moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. Lunar Base appeared on his screen, the massive space station that had been humanity's gateway to the stars for over 2 centuries. What happened next made his blood run cold. The Prometheus didn't slow down as it approached the docking bay. It didn't request permission or follow any safety protocols. Instead, the ship seemed to flow forward like water, its hull touching the station's outer wall and then merging with it. "Sir," Park Jisoo gasped, "are you seeing this? The ship it's becoming part of the station." The silver hull flowed and shaped itself, connecting with Lunar Base's structure as if they were made of the same liquid metal. There were no sparks, no explosions, no sounds of tearing metal. Just 2 pieces of technology becoming one, as natural as raindrops joining together on a window. "Get me every scientist we have," Li Huan said quietly. "And contact Earth Command. Tell them we might have a problem." But even as he spoke, he wondered if problem was the right word, because somewhere deep in his gut, he had the strangest feeling that everything was about to change forever. The airlock hissed open, and Captain Kim Dae stepped out like he was walking into his own living room. Dr. Song Yena almost dropped her medical scanner when she saw him. The man looked exactly the same as in the old photographs from 3 centuries ago, not a day older, not a single grey hair, not even a new wrinkle. "That's not possible," she whispered to her assistant. "People don't just stop aging." Behind Captain Kim came 12 other crew members, walking in a line like they were in some kind of slow-motion parade. Each face matched perfectly with the historical records, down to the smallest details. But something was different, something that made Song Yena's skin crawl with unease. "Welcome back to Lunar Base," Admiral Park Mina said, trying to sound official, despite her obvious shock. "We have many questions." "I'm sure you do," Captain Kim replied, and that's when everyone in the room froze. His voice sounded wrong. Not bad wrong, but strange wrong. Like hearing music played underwater, or listening to someone speak while standing in a cathedral. There were extra sounds hidden inside his words, harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Song Yena held up her medical scanner, the same device that could tell you everything about a person's health in seconds. The screen flickered, showed some numbers, then went completely crazy. Lines of data scrolled past faster than anyone could read, and error messages popped up in languages the computer didn't even recognize. "What's wrong with this thing?" she muttered, shaking the scanner. "Nothing is wrong with your device," said Lieutenant Choi Minho, one of the returned crew members. His voice had the same strange quality, like an echo of an echo. "Your instruments simply cannot understand what we have become." Song Yena looked into his eyes and immediately wished she hadn't. They were still human eyes, brown and familiar, but there was something behind them that seemed to stretch on forever. Like looking into a deep well at night and seeing stars reflected at the bottom, except the stars were moving and swirling in patterns that made her feel dizzy. "Run a full medical scan," Admiral Park Mina ordered. "I'm trying," Song Yena said, pulling out every piece of equipment she had. Blood pressure monitors went haywire. X-ray machines produced images that looked like abstract art. Even the simple thermometer couldn't decide if these people were hot or cold. The translation devices that could handle 47 different alien languages started stuttering and beeping in confusion. Every time one of the crew members spoke, the machines would pause, make strange clicking sounds, then display error messages about unknown harmonic frequencies and impossible vocal patterns. "Your technology works perfectly," Captain Kim said with a gentle smile. "But we exist in ways your science has not yet discovered. We are still human, Dr. Song, but we have learned to be human in more dimensions than you currently recognize." Song Yena stared at her readings. According to her instruments, these people's cells were somehow existing in multiple states at the same time. Alive and not alive, solid and not solid, present and absent. It was like trying to measure a shadow or weigh a dream. "How is this possible?" she asked. Captain Kim's eyes seemed to twinkle with starlight. "We have been to places where impossible is just another word for undiscovered. The Great Hall on Arcturus Prime had never been so quiet. 47 different alien species sat in their seats, all staring at the human standing at the center of the room. Captain Kim Day looked so ordinary compared to the strange creatures around him. The crystal beings that sparkled like living diamonds, the metal robots with glowing red eyes, the floating jellyfish-like aliens that changed colors when they thought. But everyone knew this ordinary-looking human had just done something impossible. He had traveled to places that didn't exist on any map and come back to tell about it. "You want to know where we went?" Captain Kim said, his voice carrying that strange echo that made the translation machines work overtime. "We went beyond the edge of everything you think you know." A representative from the Zethkari Empire, looking like a walking sculpture made of blue crystal, leaned forward. "Impossible. Our ships have mapped every corner of the galaxy. There is nothing beyond the rim except empty void." Captain Kim smiled. "That's what we thought too, but empty doesn't mean nothing is there. It just means you haven't learned how to see it yet." He began to pace slowly around the center of the room, and everyone's eyes followed him like he was performing magic tricks. "When our ship crossed the galactic boundary, space itself began to change. The stars stopped being fixed points and started flowing like rivers. Time didn't move forward anymore. It spiraled and twisted like smoke in the wind." "What are you talking about?" demanded a Nexus Collective robot, its mechanical voice crackling with confusion. "Time is constant. Physics is law." "Physics is just the rules for one small part of reality," Captain Kim replied. "Out there beyond what you call the edge, we learned that reality has many more rooms than you've ever imagined." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the assembled. "Aliens. These were beings who had conquered worlds, built empires, and considered themselves masters of the universe. But this human was talking about places that made their achievements seem like children playing with toys. We met them on our third day in the void, Captain Kim continued. The architects, being so old that they were there when the very first. Star lit up the darkness. They remember when gravity was just an idea, when matter was learning how to hold itself together. Engineer Choi Jin stood up from her seat and walked to the center of the room. She was a small woman who looked like she could be anyone's neighbor, but when she moved there was something fluid about her steps, like she was walking through water instead of air.